Special meeting of the Energy and Environment Committee, and I'm Council President Pro Tem Jan Perry, joined by Council Member Krikorian and Council Member Koretz. And today is Tuesday, July the 11th, 2011, and it is about 10 after 2 in the afternoon. We are in room 1060. Mr. CLA, I think you had a suggestion about taking some items out of order so we could spend the rest of the time talking to our candidate.
Yes, Madam Chair. We'd like to recommend that you take items 2 and 3 out of order.
Okay.
That would allow you sufficient time to cover item number 1.
Okay, great. And then let's start with 2.
Number 2 relates to the DWP report relative to proposed amendment number 2 to the agreement with Fuentes and McNally for legal representation in the manner of Miranda versus the Department of Water and Power.
Okay, is there anybody here to comment on that?
CAO and Department of Water and Power.
Okay. So I just wanted to clarify, this amendment to this agreement with Fuentes and McNally is a time extension only, and that there are no additional funds required?
Correct.
Okay, now, can you tell the committee what the total amount of the existing contract is and how long the time extension is? And is the additional 12-month period that you're requesting sufficient time to complete, I believe it's pending litigation?
Yes. Good afternoon. The complete contract is a total of $400,000. It will now expire on December 31st, 2011. And we are certain it's going to trial January 25th, a couple weeks. And we anticipate that.
And again, the total amount of the contract?
$400,000.
And how are you certain you can get to trial in 12 months? What court is it
This
in?
has actually been postponed numerous times, and the last directive from the judge, we have a new judge in this case, is that it will go to trial on January 25th of this month.
Okay, so I guess we'll know in a couple of weeks.
I hope so.
Okay, would you come back to us in, say, 45 days and let us know whether you're in trial or not?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any questions? Mr. Alarcon has joined us. So, any other questions? All right, great. Then that'll be without objection. That's item number 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
CIO, do you agree? Yes?
We concur.
Thank you.
Right here.
Okay.
Item
Item 3.
Item number 3, Board of Public Works report relative to transfer of ownership of the Marina Tide Gates from the county to the city of Los Angeles. We have staff from the Bureau of Sanitation.
Okay, okay, great. We also, come on up, staff. We also have a card on item 2. Mr. Mike Massey, come on up.
Councilwoman, I wish to speak on item 1.
Oh, you do? Oh, I'm sorry.
Number 1.
Your one looked like a 2. Sorry about that. Okay. Got it. All right, I will make it.
My fault.
No, I just, it's okay.
I made that 1 a 2.
Okay, I just made your 2 a 1. All right.
Okay.
Wing Tam with sanitation.
Mike Spito with the Bureau of Sanitation, Watershed Protection Division.
Okay, why don't you tell us the schedule for the repair work on the tide gates?
Schedule for the repair work will begin upon the City Council approving and adopting the transfer agreement. From then, the county is going to construct the project. So whenever we get done with the agreement, they'll start it up.
Okay, so when does the city anticipate the county completing its repair project? And then when would the city take possession of the tide gates?
I'm thinking, well, by the time the county gets the contractor in place, it's going to be about 6 months. The repairs are scheduled to take place over a 6-month period. From then, there's a 90-day testing period, which the county will operate and maintain it. If there's 90 complete days of successful operation, then the city will take over that.
So then we take over the operation of the tide gates, and will the city coordinate the operation of these tide gates with the Venice tide gates that the city already owns and operates?
That's the intent, correct?
Okay, now does the Bureau have sufficient funding in its existing budget to operate and maintain the gates once the city takes possession of them?
In speaking with our financial management division, yes.
And do you anticipate any impact to the general fund associated with this issue?
No.
We're actually planning to absorb it with our existing staff to do that work for maintaining those gates.
You're not the CAO.
No, I'm with the sanitation.
And sanitation.
Okay, we're CAO. CAO, where are you?
Here a moment ago.
Okay, we need a CAO.
Yeah,
Oh,
so he's in the back.
okay, thank you, sir.
Last,
Just need to know what the CAO has to say.
I'm David Hirano from the Office of CAO. We actually haven't seen this request yet, so we can't opine on
Great.
this.
Okay, that's not good. You know what? It sounds really good, but I do feel like I need to be consistent and have a CAO report on file as part of the official record. So, what do you want to do?
We could,
If you're asking for a CAO report, we will get you one.
You want to have it at the next meeting? Let's have it at the next
Yeah.
meeting. You guys come
Spirit
back,
of it.
CAO report. Yep.
I'm not sure we can do it that fast.
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah, I'm not sure we can do it that fast, given where our staffing is right now. If we could ask for 30 days, that'd be better.
Is that going to throw you guys way off schedule?
No, I don't believe so. We can work.
Okay.
I think we'll
30 days, come back,
Good.
CAO report, then we can just knock it out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, now we're on to item 1.
Item number 1. Board of Water and Power Commissioners report relative to the appointment of Mr. Ron Nichols as General Manager of the Department of Water and Power.
Hi.
Mr. Nichols is here.
We do have 3 cards, so I'm going to no, actually, we have 4 cards now. Are there any more cards for item 1? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Does anybody else have any cards on item 1? Okay, that's it? Okay. All right, why don't you, Mr. Nichols, why don't you start off by talking about your qualifications?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, I'm Ron Nichols. I've been appointed nominated by the mayor for your consideration. I really appreciate your time today for the consideration of the position of General Manager at LADWP. I have over actually about 35 years experience. Virtually my entire career has been in the water and electric utility business. First 5 years of that being split between the California Energy Commission and the California Department of Water Resources, and then have subsequently worked in both the electric and water utility business as a consultant, first starting my own firm, co-founded the firm, and then 13 years ago, having sold that firm to where I am now with Navigant Consulting, which is an international consulting organization. Throughout that entire last 30 years, virtually all that I have done has been principally long-term assignments with water and electric utilities, dealing with very much the types of issues that the department deals with. So it's having had the benefit of being able to be a co-founder of a firm, it gave me the prerogative of being able to choose the more interesting and challenging assignments. And as a result, through that, have not only been an advisor to utilities and executives, but have worked with them and actually been seconded management to utilities after helping them develop strategies, plans, and then helping them implement them, literally working as senior management for utilities that have annual budgets in excess of $3 billion. So I think through that process, I have a pretty good understanding, a strong understanding of both the water and electric issues that the department deals with. And I think probably more importantly than that, a significant, probably good 25 plus years of that experience has been here in California. And through that, I have a very strong understanding of the energy markets. I've dealt extensively with water issues, water supply issues, regulatory matters around both of those in California that I think provides some very strong background for the issues that the department deals with both on a daily operational basis and on a long-term planning basis. I'm fully aware of the union issues, strong union that the department has. I've worked well with unions and dealt with union issues extensively in the past. Found there's always decent ways to make good compromises with respect to that. And I've also, as a result of a significant amount of my work, vast majority of the work, having been with governmental utilities, either municipal utilities or special district utilities, quite accustomed to dealing with both the operational and more technical types of issues on a day-to-day basis, and then dealing on the policy issues with elected and appointed officials as well. And I believe that experience will come in well in supporting the requirements that the council and the department has.
What do you see as a difference in making this transition from the consulting world to running a publicly owned utility? What do you think are the greatest differences or challenges that you'll face?
In a lot of ways, I don't think there are an awful lot of differences in the challenges. Perhaps, to be upfront with you, obviously the political issues are strong with the department, given the role that it plays, the important role that it plays in the city, and the circumstances that both the city and department are looking at in both these kind of the budget times and such. That's perhaps a bit more heightened and a bit more front and center than what I pervasively have dealt with, but I have dealt with those types of exceedingly high-profile types of issues at congressional level, state legislative level, city council levels in the past. I really think that given the fact that I haven't been kind of a typical, if you will, consultant, I work on very long-term major assignments where there have been times where I've worked with a client for pretty much exclusively for 5 years on a major implementation, a major financing, a major change in a utilities operation and cost reduction, for example. So I believe that it's not going to be that terribly different. I have not simultaneously worked on both water and power utilities for one utility at the same time. So that probably would be one area that brings an added complexity and challenge to it.
What do you think are the most important, maybe the top 3 issues that you think are facing the department at this time? And what are your thoughts on addressing those issues and resolving those problems?
Well, I think the department faces a number of the issues that many of its brother and sister utilities across the U.S. face, perhaps a little more intensely here. When you're dealing with some major deferred maintenance on both the electric and the water side, the department's not alone in that situation. It's fairly rampant throughout the utility industry, but it has hit here. It puts an added cost burden that we have to deal with on both an operating and a capital perspective going forward. I think dealing with the effort to transition for a lower reliance on coal, moving forward to more energy efficiency and transitioning further into renewable energy, has with that added cost that we need to be highly cognizant of and plan for appropriately, recognizing that to a large extent, irrespective of what discretionary action you might want to take on that, there are some outside either pending or existing mandates that the department's going to have to deal with that, and I'd certainly be happy to speak in more detail about that if you would find it appropriate. I think dealing with other major issue that is very unique to the department is dealing with the once-through cooling. It's a significant externally forced cost that we'll need to deal with, and that's an item that is quite unique to the department that comes on top of the other. You wrap all of those things together and deal at the same time with the current economic circumstances that we have, and it makes all of it a harder challenge, and it puts more of a spotlight on any upward cost pressure with the department's costs.
I wanted to ask you about the Long Island Lighting Company, and you played a key role in transitioning the Long Island Lighting Company to the Long Island Power Authority. And I wanted you to just talk a bit about your relationship with the employees and the union in that case, and how you worked with them to achieve that successful transition.
Sure, gladly, Madam Chairman. I was involved. I was involved both I was brought in by the New York Governor's office as part of their team taking the lead in helping evaluate what alternative approaches there would be to just try to reduce what were, at that time, the highest electric rates in the continental U.S. Through that process, there was a decision ultimately made to negotiate an acquisition of the Long Island Lighting Company. And that required, it's a complex transaction, lots of moving parts. Part of that was going to require taking out some pieces of that utility that got merged with another. And as soon as you start moving different pieces of an existing organization with another, particularly when it has a union organization, you deal with unions.
You had a cost reduction plan, I think, that you employed as part of this transition, and I think you were fairly creative in getting the employees to support you in that.
We did. There were a lot of elements of that cost reduction. One of those elements was a financing option that was available then that is not available today. But a key aspect of that was by doing some restructuring of that utility and some merging a part of it with another, was putting together what we called, it's kind of a euphemistic phrase in the merger business called synergy savings. So in other words, you pull together some activities and bring some common functions together, and through that process you reduce your costs. There was a negotiation that involved the unions, the Long Island Power Authority, and the management of the utilities involved to work that out in a manner that, so it wasn't done on the backs of labor, but was done in a manner that could achieve reductions. Overall, a 2%. That piece was a 2% reduction in the overall rates, which may not seem like a lot, but when you're talking the size of that entity, it was a significant savings.
Well, I think you also played a role in the state resolving the energy crisis, and I think you helped negotiate power supply contracts and establish rates for IOUs, which I believe helped the market back into at least stable level. Talk about that aspect of your work history and how the Department of Water and Power can benefit from these experiences. And then if you can put that in a bigger context, I don't know if you're aware that the Department of Water and Power sold power to the state and IOUs during the energy crisis period, and helped various entities. Now, subsequent to that, the department and the city were sued for making a profit on those sales. Now, the city ultimately won the lawsuit. However, this was depending on which side of the coin you were, a very egregious action or a very innovative action by the state using these IOUs. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that kind of an approach.
Gladly. Would be helpful to give a little bit of explanation of what my role was as background there. I don't want to provide unnecessary detail if you're not interested in those details.
No.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. There were a lot of moving parts. This was started in January 2001, and I was brought in by the governor's office then, along with a team that I brought from my firm, to assist first just getting our arms around. Literally overnight, you had three investor-owned utilities who were financially unable to purchase power, and so the state came in and took over that position literally overnight, and they were more than a bit overwhelmed by that. So we were brought in to assist, under my leadership of that group, to assist getting our arms around how much did they need to buy, when were they going to get it from, how do we get our arms around it, what's it going to cost, and then help move towards trying to reduce those costs by entering into some longer-term contracts that were a fraction of the cost of what they were paying in that spot market. And that and many other items were a piece of getting some downward pressure on the prices that were being paid, as well as downward pressure on the market overall. I was involved early on, because it'd be the first 3 or 4 months, things were still being purchased in that horribly expensive spot market. So dealing with helping to find where those sources could be had, and you are correct, the department was one of the many parties that was selling at that time, and the state purchased that power and used it for the benefit of the customers of the 3 investor-owned utilities. I was then largely moved over into other roles at that point. The department kind of got, the Department of Water Resources kind of got themselves into a position to be able to deal with the day-to-day purchasing of power. I was then involved helping enter into and find long-term contracts and help negotiate some of those contracts and find ways to reduce those costs. And then simultaneously, since the Department of Water Resources division there was had to borrow from the state general fund for a significant portion of those monies, I worked with the State Department of Finance, the State Treasurer's Office, and with the investment banking team to put together a $11 billion financing to repay the state treasury and the general fund for that. So those are going on simultaneously. Can say that while I was involved in a number of the items for subsequent litigation around the long-term contracts to help reduce those costs even further, I personally was not involved in any issue with regard to any disputes between California Department of Water Resources and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power with regard to the short-term purchases that you were referring to. So I wasn't involved in that.
Yeah, you're probably aware of some of the past activities between the department and the city of Los Angeles, the city council, in particular over the past year with respect to the energy cost adjustment factor. And I'm sure you're keenly aware of the financial issues the department faces as it prepares on a going forward basis to propose rate increases for both water and power in the coming months. Now, council does have a mandated role, and we have a number of things that are going on the ballot for March the 8th and with respect to analyzing and considering rate requests. Obviously we hope to work closely with you to ensure the well-being of the department, but also the well-being of the ratepayers. So along with the rate proposal, the department has developed a new IRP, or Integrated Resources plan, that we're all going to have an opportunity to discuss and to assess. And the IRP contains options for modernizing the department's operations, obtaining efficiencies, and meeting renewable portfolio standard objectives. And I was just wondering if you've had a chance to formulate any sort of reaction or opinion on the IRP.
Well, I can't say I've gone through the IRP with the same level of detail I would as sitting in the position. I've reviewed it. I think you need to keep in mind that an IRP is kind of one part of a process. I mean, it's an identification of long-term options and the consequences of taking different actions on a portfolio of power supplies and energy efficiency plans and other upgrades that are necessary to a system. And I think in that regard, as I've looked over it, I think there's a reasonably good assessment of the options. I think the difficulty that the department is dealing with right now, and they're not alone with this in the utility industry, is things are changing so quickly. I mean, if looking at the types of changes in energy prices and the need to reduce carbon footprint and other changes, and just the various technologies that are coming out. During the course of doing, let's say, an 18-month resource plan, those things can change. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I know the department is already starting to work on, and I will certainly work with them to expand further, is to get our arms around what are the rate and the cost consequences of those different paths, and so that when you're looking at, yes, this might be how much we might go with renewables, this is how much we might reduce our reliance on coal, here's what we might do for reduced energy efficiency. Let's get our arms around better as to what specific decisions need to be made when, and what are the rate consequences to the electric utility customer as a result of that. So I know that frankly to date hasn't been a big detail in there. There's a start towards that. Efforts preceding me are moving down that path, and I would pursue as a high priority trying to get our arms around that even better for the benefit of council and customers and stakeholders.
Mr. Cardenas has joined us. Got a few more questions, and then I'm going to go to the other members. With respect to RPS issues and matters, what's your experience in integrating renewables into utility operations? And along those lines, just share if you have a vision with respect to a successful RPS program for the department and the city and the ratepayers. Simple task, right?
And be general and specific?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And visionary.
I've dealt with renewable energy, and when I speak of renewable energy, I think characteristically would include energy efficiency as part of that, because I frankly think energy efficiency has a higher priority than just development of new renewable energy generation. The best energy that you ever produce is that which you don't have, that which you reduce your need for. I've worked with that literally my entire career, going back to California Energy Commission in the 1970s, but more specifically to implementation. We spoke earlier about this Long Island Power Authority opportunity and circumstance in New York. Well, we not only had to reduce, looking at a major reduction in rates, simultaneously we're taking a utility that had next to zero energy efficiency plans or renewable energy and moved them at a rate that was significantly above anything that had been in their plans previously, and did so maintaining very, very competitive rates and very minor increases in the reduced rates that were achieved by making that acquisition of that utility. I've worked subsequently with since that with utilities in the Pacific Northwest. I've worked off and on for over 20 years with other municipal utilities in California, City of Santa Clara. I've developed for them a major small hydroelectric plan that was a major piece of their renewable portfolio standard that they're very proud of today. I've worked with investor-owned utilities to integrate photovoltaic resources, evaluated feed-in tariff programs associated with that, and I've worked extensively on assisting utilities in bringing in their energy efficiency plans, which can be its own challenge when you want to reduce your use, but of course you still have fixed costs in that utility and have to allocate those costs. So I've dealt with not only the theory and the planning, but where the rubber hits the road, and having these be an actual integrating, operating part of the utilities portfolio.
My last question, and this is interesting. I mean, we've had a lot of general managers over the past 10 years, right?
Yes, you have.
You heard, right?
Well aware.
Okay, good. So we're looking for some stability and someone who's going to be able to take the department in the right direction and to be able to be there for a while. How do you see yourself being able to do that?
Well, I think my experience, some of which we've touched on here this afternoon, prepares me very well to do that. I've dealt with difficult issues. I've dealt with very high-profile issues on both water and electric side. And as a result, I think that experience is helpful. I'm not a politician, yet I'm not a stranger in dealing with the political realities of the things that we all need to deal with in making tough decisions. I've worked with, as senior management in utilities. I'm accustomed to dealing with the day-to-day operational issues, and as a result, I feel I can move in and make a meaningful difference working with what I think we still need to recognize are a very hardworking and capable group of people within the Department of Water and Power.
Why don't we go across the table here and start with Mr. Krikorian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Nichols, welcome.
Thank you,
It's
Councilman.
good to have a chance to chat with you again. I appreciate that you described your role with DWR in the aftermath of the energy crisis. That was I was curious about that myself because in the legislature we had to deal with some of the aftermath of that.
Indeed.
And it was a challenge to unwind some of what we had to do during that crisis period. I'm curious, that makes me wonder, did you have any role with state energy policy development, and particularly with the deregulation of energy prior to the energy crisis? Were you an advisor to the legislature? Did you work with Senator Brulte or in other capacity with regard to deregulation?
No, I was not at that. I was not involved in advising on the specific steps of deregulation, nor did I work with the legislature on that. I certainly tracked what was going on behalf of parties who were very interested in knowing how it might affect them. But I was not an advisor with respect to putting that structure together or its implementation.
Okay, thanks. Now, one of the obvious significant challenges that the DWP has been facing is a crisis of confidence and trust on the part of the public. There is a perceived significant lack of transparency in the operation of the department, and I'd like to have some sense of, if you were in the position as the general manager, what would you see as being important goals for yourself in addressing that trust deficit in the first year or so that you're on the job? What would be the sort of net takeaways that you'd like to produce to enhance the department's transparency and public accountability?
Well, I think that will start first probably in this year's budgeting process. As an example, I understand that we're finally the department's getting aligned on it temporarily with the city's budget and the department's budget, and through that process, I would anticipate having greater detail with regard to that and ability to get better back and forth in terms of understanding of that. It's a big budget. I know the city's budget is a big budget, and you're already struggling with dealing with myriad details on that. There will be myriad details on both the water and electric side, within the power side, within the department. But I think that process is already kind of underway to start getting there. I will look forward to working with the department on that. I think the other is on near term. Certainly within the first issue around that will be the topic that Madam Chair and I were just discussing about with regard to the integrated resource plan, which is kind of the predecessor to what will happen to future budgets. And I think getting better visibility with regard to what are the consequences of those alternative policy choices that are taken, and getting better information around that. Like I said, that process is already starting. That predates me, I'm happy to see that we're not starting from ground zero on that. But that would be an area, as an example, I think, of a couple of key focus areas of enhanced transparency.
And somewhat related to that, on the March ballot, the voters will be voting on a charter amendment to create a position of ratepayer advocate within the department. What do you see as the relationship that you would have with a ratepayer advocate, and would you be committed today to ensuring that the ratepayer advocate has full and complete access to all necessary information in the department, and that the department will cooperate in every way in ensuring that the ratepayer advocate has the information needed to be able to make independent assessments of the expenditures and costs that the department incurs?
Well, first, I haven't, to my knowledge, there isn't a specific, and if there is, I've not seen it, a specific proposal of exactly how that function is to be, the protocols and such around that. I've not seen the actual, I don't know if there is actual language yet as to what goes on the ballot, and if there is, I've not seen that. So with that significant caveat that I don't know exactly how large of a group and what their protocols are going to be with regard to that, I have to respond a little bit generally.
Okay.
I'm certainly accustomed to dealing with third-party reviewers. I've dealt in my work with the California Department of Water Resources on these contracts that we were talking about earlier. California Public Utilities Commission, though it did not have regulatory authority over the Department of Water Resources, they voluntarily worked very closely with the commission, and the commission then did a review. And in addition to the commission, the Division of Ratepayer Advocates did a review as well. Very accustomed to dealing with them. It's always important to make sure that when you provide them information, it's the latest information and it's definitive. It's not, and if it's something that's subject to change, they're aware of that. But I think I have no concerns about providing good information. I think I can certainly see the benefits in terms of enhancing that transparency process, of having a group of people who are focused on that and can give their attention to that time over time. I think there's some benefit, and I certainly have no difficulty whatsoever in working with them.
So then we could count that as being your commitment to work cooperatively with the ratepayer advocate to ensure that the ratepayer advocate has all necessary information to appropriately and independently assess the expenditures of the department.
Well, I certainly will work in commitment with them. I'm always nervous about any word that says "all," because someone could ask for something that doesn't exist. But in terms of giving them the information that they need, giving them information that they've requested to the extent the information exists, or getting the information if it doesn't exist, trying to, that can be reasonably pulled together, I have no problem with that, and I would anticipate that would be how the department would act with them, and I would enforce that.
Thank you. Have you considered yet, and this is a little operational, so you might not have, but at least as a general conceptual matter, have you considered the possibility of the departments working in collaboration with neighboring either munis or IOUs in order to realize cost efficiencies, particularly in areas of transmission, for example, or in common development of renewable generation or other sorts of things like that? Is there a place for collaboration with other utilities?
Well, I definitely believe there's a place for collaboration with other utilities. Clearly, the department has a long history of doing that with the other Southern California Public Power Authority members, and would certainly anticipate and support the department continuing to do that. There's been a little more difficulty in the municipal and public power utilities and the investor-owned utilities working hand in hand, but I wouldn't want to rule that out, and particularly when you're dealing with renewable energy, and frankly, even potentially energy efficiency programs. I mean, scale counts sometimes, and shared risks count sometimes. So I would not rule that out, but I do know that there hasn't been a strong legacy of that, and it does take two to tango. It does take reciprocation by the other parties. But I, having worked with, and particularly in California, worked in and around virtually every utility in the state, to the extent that parties are willing to do that, I'm certainly open to entertain that.
What do you consider to be the appropriate degree to which local jobs should be a consideration in assessing a renewable energy portfolio options? And specifically, I'd kind of like to know what your philosophy is about utility scale generation versus in-basin generation, whether a feed-in tariff is the particular one proposed by the LA Business Council or otherwise is a more cost-effective way to meet renewable energy goals than, say, utility-owned generation or some other type of generation. Can you talk a little bit about those?
I can. There's a lot of questions in there, so I'll try to parse them out a bit. Going back first to the question with regard to the local jobs issue. That's an issue with which I've dealt extensively. One example, recently I just completed And I led this on behalf of our firm, a 9-month effort with the state of Washington to prepare for them a plan exactly aimed at that, and that is what could they as a state do to enhance the prospect of, when we're looking to meet clean energy objectives, how do we do that in a manner that maximizes local jobs and local business and to the benefit of the local economy? So I'm highly attuned to that. Our firm, my firm, Navigant Consulting, also about a year ago completed a national study for the National Hydroelectric Association, looking at what can be done for small hydroelectric projects being able to enhance local jobs and such. So something that I've spent a lot of time on, and to the point of taking it to state legislative action and working with industry, working with utilities, working with environmental and clean energy advocacy groups on. So, and through that, the important learning from that is really one of the most important new job-intensive opportunities associated with clean energy when you're looking at it, particularly from a utilities perspective, is energy efficiency. It's more labor-intensive. It's local labor. It's local companies. And again, going back to when you partner that up with the idea that your best way to reduce carbon is not to use energy to begin with, they kind of, it's nice that they go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. Going to your other point with regard to in-basin versus out-of-basin, it really depends on the individual projects that you're looking at. If you have to build brand new, major lengthy transmission to bring in renewable resources, it's tough, and it's always important, in my view, to take a look at not just what's the cost of that wind energy or biomass or geothermal or solar facility that might be distant. You also want to make sure what's that delivered cost going to be. So you need to take those things into consideration. And you can't generically always say, well, in-basin is going to be cheaper because you don't have transmission. But looking at the prospect, for example, of having in-basin photovoltaic being kind of the most logical and immediately available technology is something I think we need to take a really good hard look at. And I know that is being looked at further as part of the integrated resource plan.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to monopolize this. Just one last thing, and then maybe I'll come back later. What are your thoughts about RECs as a way to balance cost impacts with achieving greenhouse gas reduction goals? And what is your thought about natural gas as a transitional fuel, especially given the degree to which the DWP is currently reliant on coal in meeting greenhouse gas objectives as opposed to 33% RPS?
Let me take the latter one first and then go back to the renewable energy credits or RECs question. I think we have no choice but having natural gas be a swing fuel and a transitional fuel. There aren't a lot of other dispatchable, that is controllable, around-the-clock resources out there. While natural gas does have its carbon emissions, they're a fraction of coal. And the more we have intermittent renewable resources of wind and solar being generally more predictable than wind, but still having its intermittency, you have to have the ability to shape and firm around that, and that natural gas is going to play that role for quite some time. So I think it's inevitable, and we need to be looking carefully at what are the cost risks, the volatility of that as we look at that, and mindful of what are the carbon effects of that as well. Again, goes back to that same first point. Energy efficiency, to the extent you do that and can do that cost effectively, reduces the amount that you need to rely upon on natural gas. The renewable energy credit or REC issue is a thorny and complex one, and
Don't I know it?
I think the general notion there, and to simplify it, I mean, the general notion there is that rather than building or contracting for a specific renewable energy resource, you go out and you buy a tradable proxy for that renewable energy credit from someone else who produces it somewhere else. There's pros and cons for that. If you're looking on a broader scale, kind of looking outside the department's perspective and looking at it from a carbon reduction, because carbon is carbon, and reducing it anywhere, we believe, if you believe the scientists, is a good thing, kind of irrespective of where that happens. So if you have renewable energy credits, and if that makes more cost-effective renewable energy get built somewhere, and that reduces the global carbon emissions, that's a good thing to the extent that it makes more cost-effective things happen. But to the extent that you're entering into RECs for some renewable energy project or set of projects outside the state, outside your locality, you don't get the job benefits out of that. And that's a factor that you got to consider in that process. There are a lot more issues around RECs that we could talk about that might bore some of us, but I mean, my view on that is you look very carefully at RECs. I kind of tend to think of RECs as kind of a last resort option, potentially a filler option. And by that I mean we're looking at a long-term kind of ramping up of renewable energy or lower carbon overall. That's going to be mandated for us whether we select to do it or not. And therefore, at times you might need to kind of fill that ramp out. You might need to enter into some RECs until another major project, actually physical project, can come online.
Thank you.
Mr. Alarcon?
Yeah, we had a meeting this morning and talk about a lot of issues, so I won't bore all of you with all that discussion. My first question to Mr. Nichols was, how long have you been a masochist?
Nice.
But my major concerns about the Department of Water and Power have been around the issues of their relationship with the ratepayers, the billing process, which I think the fact that we've combined so many other fees onto the bill puts a target on the back of DWP, and I think we need to change that. But and you know, I've been around the city of Los Angeles for a long time as with some of my colleagues, dating back to 1981, and I've seen a lot of general managers, a lot of different styles, academic experience, professional experience, a couple of legislative analysts who became general managers, and you know, a utility expert, and so I guess my fundamental question is, why do you believe you're going to do better than all those other people? And I know that's obviously a wide open question, but we've gone at this from a lot of different angles in terms of the general manager position, and I'd at least like to hear your answer to that question about why you believe that you at this time are in a position to improve the atmosphere around the Department of Water and Power.
Well, thank you, Councilman. I'd be glad to respond to that. Obviously, I had to think about that a lot before agreeing to accept a nomination for this position. And I wouldn't be sitting before you if I didn't think, in the truest depths of my heart, that I could do this and do a good job of it. Whether I will do it to everyone's satisfaction and benchmark appropriately to above all of the past general managers, I can't say that's necessarily the case. I'll make mistakes we're human. But I think some of the things we've talked about today in terms of my experience prepares me somewhat unusually to do this. I'm unaware of any other of the past general managers in the last decade that have had the different types of experience that I've had in dealing with the scale of some of these issues, that at the same time, like I said, as I think I've indicated in our discussions with some of you individually, is numbers and facts and basis and consistency count with me in a big way. So I do tend to drill into things in a fair amount of detail to get comfort around that. And I'm not by that saying at all that past GMs haven't done that nor have had the capacity. It's not a slam on them. I'm just saying it's a character of how I go about things, and having worked in difficult circumstances before. When you're brought in you don't get brought in as a consultant on a high-profile situation because everything's working fine. You get brought in because things are broken, or perceptions of things are broken. Sometimes it is just a perception. So I've dealt with issues. I've dealt with needing to come up with something very quickly and in thorny situations, and I enjoy that environment, and I think I'm good at it. And I believe I'm good at working with an organization people within those organizations to try to help get the best out of them around that. I think the department, from everything I've seen over the years of the department and the limited amount of time I've had to spend with the department people during this process of considering the position, there's some excellent people in the department. They work hard, they care passionately about the department. And I believe that I can work well with them to help trigger that passion more, to be able to meet a broader set of objectives that I believe the council and others and the customers are looking for.
Thank you. A specific question that I had that I didn't speak to you about this morning, that Mr. Krikorian sort of triggered the thought. We really don't have to go to the ballot to do a ratepayer advocate. It could be funded by the department if they so choose. And without putting you on the spot, I'm going to say you might want to consider a way to do that and avoid the ballot. Of course, it would have to be an independent entity of some kind, but I think that would set a good tone for the department to move forward with a commitment to transparency that's demonstrated by swift action to create the ratepayer advocate position. The issue of trust, we discussed the notion that the ratepayers simply don't have the level of trust that we should have between our Department of Water and Power and the ratepayers. What kinds of things do you see that you can do to, and perhaps some experiences that you've had in this subject area? What might you offer as things you'll look into?
Well, trust comes in a lot of different ways, but it tends to manifest itself around people being surprised. Things coming up without them knowing that a decision was, about to be made or had ostensibly been made. So I think getting timely information out, getting more information with regard to what are the options before an option is selected. And I believe the department is actually, preceding me in my hopeful future tenure, has started down that road more. In that regard, and I think we talked about that a little bit earlier here in this session. Those are the types of things that I think help a great deal. I think getting information out before decisions are made, letting people have more daylight on the options before things are set in stone, or before something has to be acted upon, is a really big part of that. and I think it will go a long way, I believe, to restoring some trust. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful in that process that it ends up being more of a perception clarification than reality. In other words, from what I have seen of the department, I admit it's not like I've been in the chair, but I don't think there's I think there's a desire for people to get within the department to get information out, to share it, and to do it in the proper way. And I think they've started down that path with some of the work that Interim Austin Buettner has done with them, and I'll work forward on that further.
Yeah, I'll finish with a comment, Madam Chair. What I find refreshing about this appointment is that with all those general managers that I've interrelated with in the numerous years that I've been affiliated with the City of Los Angeles, there tends to be, and this isn't a statement that applies to each general manager, but there tends to be what I consider to be an over-reliance on staff support. And I think Mr. Nichols has the independent knowledges and abilities to be able to make decisions that aren't necessarily relying on input from staff, because you've had enormous experience that may transcend their knowledge. And the diversity of experience that you've had, I think, is going to provide great opportunities. But I say that with a note of caution that this is just a tough job. And so I thank you for your masochism. I thank you for your willingness to come to Los Angeles. We really need somebody to move us forward in, as you described, a tumultuous environment, and moving forward a dynamic, extremely dynamic situation. So you have my commitment to work with you, particularly on the issues of trust, improving the relationship between the ratepayers and the department. The billing system, I think, needs to be fixed. Be happy to work with you on that. And hopefully we can more effectively use the neighborhood council system to work with the department so that the word gets to those ratepayers in a more effective way. Not to mention the challenges of moving forward in the greenest way possible without bankrupting the department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cardenas.
Yes. The last guy that went through the council to get this job, I told him he was crazy. And he's a friend of mine. I liked him a lot. He's still a friend of mine. But I think this is one of the toughest jobs in the country, certainly one of the toughest jobs around this city and this region. It is the largest water and power district owned by the public in the country. So it's a big task, no matter how you slice it. It's got 100 years of history. But all too often, I think that when policy gets discussed between the Department of Water and Power and, say, the council, for example, the press and the people watching are too quick to try to make it seem like it's all about personalities and it's not about policy. I believe that by and large, the discussions over the last few years since I've been on this council have been by and large about policy. There are some common denominators over at the Department of Water and Power that don't change when the general manager name changes on the door. Those are still there. So one of my questions to you is, when it comes to energy efficiency, you described a little earlier on that it's a higher benefit than renewable / or green energy, just efficiency of. You made a point to point out that energy that you don't use is the cleanest energy. That's my interpretation of what you described,
Correct.
right? Energy you don't use is the cleanest energy. So do you anticipate that you could be successful in implementing a plan to put energy efficiency higher on the list than green or renewable energy? Not that one has to do without the other, but there's a priority list.
Well, even within, Councilman, even within, you're right. You can't. Number one, there is no silver bullet, so you need to rely on a range of things, a whole portfolio of options.
But my question is specifically to priority. Because right now, in my personal opinion, energy efficiency is not a high enough priority with the department.
And one thing, not to be a cop out on, I have not gone through in great detail all the investments that
I'm not asking you to outline
that the council has made.
I'm not asking you to outline details of what's going on.
Right.
But as you imagine, being the head of this particular department, Department of Water and Power of Los Angeles, do you anticipate that it is your that you're going to put forth efforts to put it higher on the priority list, the best energy, which is the energy not used, versus other priorities?
Well, I would with a strong mind towards the cost and rate effects. In other words, you want to look at, because all energy efficiency is not the same. It doesn't all cost the same. There is a whole range of different measures that depend upon what you're trying to target, whether it's a residential or whether it's industrial or a commercial. I mean, there's myriad options there, and some of them are still generally, what kind of referred to as low-hanging fruit. There's opportunity out there. I don't know how much of that has been, in effect, kind of harvested within the department. I know the department has, in its integrated resource plan, is looking to get to a 10% energy efficiency. That's a good, strong number. I can tell you that 10% would put the department among the nation's leaders as percentage reduction of energy in a utility. As to the relative cost of going up that ladder to get 10%, and how each of those measures track to, say, wind energy, rooftop in-basin photovoltaics, et cetera, you've got to look at that. And we will look at that. So you would have my pledge that those types of comparisons will be made as we go through, with the notion towards if it's energy efficiency, and we're make sure we do the most cost-effective energy efficiency before we go build renewable energy. All other factors considered.
Well, with all due respect, you're going to find out that all of that has been looked at and looked at and looked at with this department over and over and over again. The only dumb luck that we have is that over time, you look at the cost curve per megawatt or kilowatt, it's come down. So somebody that may have invested in a plant 15 years ago isn't going to, you invest in that same megawatt output plant, you're not going to pay the same, you're going to pay less. So that's the only benefit of us having put off being much more aggressive and effective in implementing renewable energy and energy efficiency. But on another note, which I believe is directly along those lines, are you aware as to whether or not the Department of Water and Power of Los Angeles has a tariff feed-in policy?
Feed-in tariff
Feed-in
policy?
tariff policy, yeah.
It's my understanding that that issue is being considered, and to the best of my knowledge, there isn't an existing one to date. I know that the matter is being discussed and it's being evaluated.
Correct. It's being discussed and evaluated like a lot of other things over and over and over again, but the results are not happening. We don't have it yet. Los Angeles is poised as any community to already have one, but we don't. And why do you think that we don't have one yet?
Well, that's an area where I'll venture out on a little bit of a limb on that topic. Feed-in tariffs provide a great signal to an end user. To say I'll go out, you'll pay me this if I put this qualifying renewable energy device at my plant or at my home or on my property, and you'll pay me this for it, and when it runs, I'm simplifying it. When it runs, I reverse the meter, and you pay me X for that. And there's lots of ways that X can be. It can be some fixed costs. It can be some variable costs. There's lots of different ways around that. The thing where we need to be careful when you do that is we also have some good experience globally at being done okay and being done poorly. And you need to make sure when you do it, you know what is the cost going to be. and what are the results associated with that going to be, and how much should we do at what rate of speed on that? It's important. It's important to have our arms around that. So the notion that it might be seemingly going a little slow, in part comes probably, I suspect, that it comes in part from some of the difficulties that have been encountered in Spain and Italy and to a lesser extent in Germany, where they probably didn't quite plan it out enough and went a little too far before they realized how it all was going to work. So my only point being, I think it's well worthwhile to consider a feed-in tariff. I think when the department implements that, they ought to do it in a measured manner that ramps it up to get good experience both from the customer side and from the department side in working on that.
So what do you think it'll take for this department, the largest municipal water department in the country, to actually start to implement, as you just described, perhaps in phases or what have you, but to actually get one inked and on paper that people can actually utilize?
In terms of period of time, how long might it take, you mean?
That was my next question.
Right, okay. Well, I think when you're looking at something that is relatively new to the industry, I mean, feed-in tariffs are evolving. This is not something that has a long legacy. So it's something that we're dealing with kind of in its early nascent stages. When you do that, you tend to do it first on kind of a pilot level. So you say, I'm going to do X amount. I'm going to set some criteria around that. I'm going to do it. I'd like to get it done relatively quickly to get some results of that, and learn from that result, and then ramp up based on actual empirical knowledge. And that's what I mean. I'm speaking without knowing exactly where the detail of the department's done on that, but that's generally the recommendation of an early approach I would take. And when you do that, I think you can move relatively quickly on doing a pilot project to get things moving and start getting some real life experience on it.
Well, around about 60 days or so, should you be confirmed, I'm going to call you and want to sit down with you and find out from you how that's coming along. And now that you've been able to get your hands involved in this particular department with these particular details, that's one of the questions I'm definitely going to ask you. So how long do you think it's going to take for us to get the first phase of that? I'll interpret what you're talking about as perhaps we're going to have to go in phases. We are large.
Right. Correct.
So when we can actually have that first phase of it that actually can be utilized, not just talked about,
right,
not on paper, not bantered about,
right,
but actually get inked and part of policy for the city. So I look forward to that discussion.
As I would as well, Councilman.
Thank you. A couple more questions.
go ahead.
Yeah. So you were in California or involved in some way in advising, the governor of California at the time of the infamous California energy crisis?
I was.
Can you give us an example, if any policy does apply, an example of what policy may have contributed to that energy crisis?
Well, as going back to discussions I had with Councilman Krikorian, I was not a part of the advice on creating that structure that
I always
resulted in
clarify that myself. I got to the legislature after that legislation was passed.
But I think clearly it was suspected at the time. In fact, I saw it real time in the position that I was at. I mean, you could see it on a daily basis. There was clearly a withholding of power. There were parties that were gaming the system. There were power plants that could have run that didn't run. I mean, I can give you numbers and such, and it would be. But at the end of the day, the policy, it wasn't necessarily a policy of making a decision to restructure. That is, to create an opportunity for a market-based selection and provision and procurement of power. It was a lack of rules and constraints from the federal level right on down to enforce an action when a party was not providing power from a resource that could have otherwise operated. And, there's a lot of other things around it,
But
but
that
at the
was
end
one
of the
of the
day,
bases for-
that was the key focus of why it happened.
The independent municipal, the independent electric providers in California, power providers, there was policy that passed the state legislature, signed by the governor, that basically said, you're going to have to choose what you're going to be. You're going to provide energy, or you're going to be selling it to the end customer,
Correct.
right? And then the ones who were actually doing both sold off their power producers and then had to go to the market
Correct.
to go get that power, correct?
That's correct.
So ultimately, it was a big decision and a big move dictated by the policymakers of California to force their hand and say, you're going to be either or, but you're not going to be both. And when they lost the opportunity, or those who chose to go with power, selling power to the end user and not being a power source provider, that's when they had to go into the system, and then, like you mentioned, a lot of gaming was going on, and a lot of games or what have you, power plants that could have been utilized, creating the semblance of a crisis that was supposed to be natural. But at the end result was the customers ended up footing a higher bill at the end of the day, by and large, in California during that crisis, correct?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Well, what that leads me to is, before I got on the council, it's my understanding that there was someone who's still bouncing around City Hall trying to get us to do this new P3 paradigm, who actually was advising a previous mayor of Los Angeles, actually Mayor Reardon, that was trying to convince the council at that time that they should sell off the power lines. And that this ungodly amount of money, I think it was about $4 billion was the round figure of what they thought they could get for it. Do you think that the power lines that belong to the Department of Water and Power today are worth more than $4 billion?
Well, I honestly couldn't tell you
That's a trick question. The answer is by far
right.
more than $4 billion. Well, I know what the answer to that is, by far more than $4 billion. But at the same time, had the policymakers at the Department of Water and Power, and with the cooperation and going along of the council and the mayor at the time, what would have happened was we would have paid more than $4 billion by now to actually use what used to be our power lines and other people's power lines to go around buying access to those power lines. We would be upside down in that equation. There's no question about it. So my question to you is, how do you feel about selling assets that actually are assets, not extra assets per se, but assets that we as a provider of energy are going to continue to utilize into the future, that we actually own and control today?
Well, I think the fact that as a municipal utility and maintaining a strong rating of your financing, you have the lowest cost of capital of any other party, and to that extent, I think, I don't know if you can always paint a blanket around everything, but it just generally speaking,
Can I ask a general question? You can give me a general
cost of capital rules, and you have the lowest cost of capital. If you sell off those assets and try to buy back from those assets, you're probably going to pay more money. So generally speaking, owning them and having them makes sense. Now, when you start getting into the area in and around renewable energy with tax credits and investment tax credits and accelerated depreciation and all of those types of things that can be conferred upon at times, renewable energy developers and owners, you got to look hard to see whether what net is cheaper than that. And so sometimes you can see there are some exceptions to what I just said, but generally speaking, you're probably going to be lower cost having your own.
Mm-hmm. But also at the same time, what's allowed is we have power lines beyond the state of California. And it's my understanding what's allowed, and our department makes good use of it, where we have excess capacity. We actually allow people to use that capacity, and we're compensated for it.
That's correct.
And as long as we own it, then that's money that comes to us, hopefully ultimately affecting positively the ratepayer, the owner of the utility. Again, I'm just trying to let you know where I'm at as a policymaker for this city. I don't see how, for example, power lines is a perfect example. is something that we should divest ourselves from and look at the monetary, the instant monetary gain in the billions, and not look at the long-term monetary loss of control and loss of capacity, and also having to actually write bigger checks to third parties for something that we already controlled.
Well, I can't disagree generically with your position. I wasn't aware that there was a pending proposal by anyone advocating.
Oh, it floats
that.
around all the
Right.
time. Yeah, it floats around all the time. But that was a glaring example where the mayor at the time was for it, and then what was that guy's name? Keating? No, Keating's another guy.
Keeley,
Mike
Keeley, right?
Oh,
Mike.
Mike,
You were on the council,
Mike
weren't you?
Keating.
Mike Keating.
Yeah, he
Mike
was
Keating.
the mayor's assistant.
Keeley, or anyway.
Keeley. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Keeley.
So if he ever comes to your office, I'm just warning you, that's probably what he's going to want to talk to you about. My last question to you is, I think it's only appropriate that I ask you this question and warn you. Have you ever been subject to negative press on a massive scale, like something as large as the Los Angeles Times or the Daily News or Channel 7 and Channel 9, where they're sticking a microphone in front of your face and you're getting bombarded and they're trying to ask you questions that you're sitting there going, that's just not true. But they have you on live camera and
Absolutely.
they're trying to, you've been in
Yes,
that situation?
Councilman, I have many occasions.
You have?
Yes.
Can you describe one of them to us?
Oh, I can try.
Right now?
Right. Yeah.
No, right now he's in a honeymoon. This is a honeymoon, believe it or not, right now.
I can recall vividly. Yeah, I'll give a couple examples. When I was working on was the spokesperson for the team on doing the acquisition of the Long Island Lighting Company, a $7 billion transaction. Having numerous occasions. Immediately after a public presentation, the Klieg lights come on, the microphones in your face, and being asked about how can you possibly do this? This is an entity you're trying to do a $7 billion acquisition. How are you possibly going to save rates? This entity has never run a utility in its life. This entity has never issued $1 of debt, on and on and on, and explain exactly how it's going to happen. Happened dozens of times on that.
And as a result of that interplay, there inevitably, I would assume, was some accurate reporting that got it right, and some reporting that actually, when you read it.
Well, I don't remember much on the accurate side.
I was trying to be generous. There's some press.
I'm not.
I was trying to be generous.
But it was New York, so I'm sure it's very different here.
Yes. Good out. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I think it's inevitable as you look at people who've been the general manager of this department for perhaps a year plus or several years. I don't know who's luckier, but the bottom line is it's inevitable that everybody goes through that more than once in any of their tenures with that responsibility that you're volunteering for. So I'm glad that you have had that experience. I'm not glad that they did that to you, but that's perhaps one of the best preparations you could have received before coming to Los Angeles and taking on this responsibility. Thank you for answering my questions. My questions right now are more general because you're not there yet and you haven't kicked the tires or opened up the hood yet or what have you directly to see for yourself. But after you see for yourself, I am going to be asking you more specific questions as we go further along. So thank you very much. I'm done. So.
Thank you, Council.
Well, unfortunately for you at this point, I think most of my questions have been asked already.
But not asked by everybody.
First, I'll just make one comment. A few of us were in the legislature at the same time during the largely constructed energy crisis, and I think literally the only way we could get out of it was doing those long-term contracts. So I commend you for doing it. At the time, it seemed like a miracle that we could get some of these companies to agree to them because they really had us over a barrel.
They did. It was a very painful process.
So I commend you for that good work. On energy conservation, we've had a lot of conversation about it. Just to be a little bit stronger about it, I would say that while we're looking on the IRP at 7%, 10% have been the conversations, I think even that is low. I would look at closer to 15%, and I would hope that you would be committed for as long as energy conservation is productive before we reach diminishing returns, to spending every dollar you can on energy conservation first, as long as it remains both clean and the cheapest way to do it. Because until we run out of good ways to spend money on energy conservation, from my point of view, there's nothing else that makes sense. And I don't know if you share that point of view.
I share that point of view, perhaps with a caveat, and that is we have spent, let's be clear, in part because they were forced to, the investor-owned utilities in California have spent a lot of money on energy efficiency, and they've spent enough money on energy efficiency now that it is a key part of their resource, and they're going back and taking a really good hard look at that, and are required to by the Public Utilities Commission to do these monitoring and verification, validation sort of studies. What did we get? What we paid for? They didn't always get what they paid for, and sometimes the resultant price, when you go back kind of the adjusted, I paid this, I expected to get that, I got something less than that. You got to be mindful of that you don't necessarily, you're dealing in many cases with human behavior on the other side of the meter. And so you need to be sure that as you start ramping up those different pieces of energy efficiency measures, the more and more they require human interaction doing the right thing, you got to make sure that you put some sort of a risk factor in there about that. So that's kind of one area of caveats. A little bit different than if you're building a power plant and deal with knowing reasonably when that's going to produce. And so by that, I'm not in any means saying I'm preferring power plants over energy efficiency. My only caveat is let's be really mindful about what we think that overall cost of each energy efficiency program is as we kind of move up that ladder.
No, I agree with that. In fact, I think it points up the fact that's the area that probably needs to be monitored the most carefully and be the most accountable, because you could just throw money at programs, and without monitoring them and thinking them through carefully, you could wind up throwing money without achieving the results that you're looking for. Just one other point, which hasn't been touched on, which is, at least in my office, I suspect it's true for most of council offices, one of the highest area of complaints is DWP. We get a lot of constituent complaints related to DWP problems, and at times I've had the sense that leadership of the DWP may think that as long as the lights are on and the water's flowing, everything is adequately being done. And sometimes the DWP bureaucracy, rather than just being responsive and providing help, is sometimes even a hindrance to clearing up problems. So have you thought much about that and how to provide improved constituent service at the DWP?
Well, number one, I haven't experienced it. I certainly have heard the anecdotes from several people. So I have my eye out for the issue, and as I think I probably have mentioned in one-on-one conversations with a few of you, utilities aren't generally the most loved entity. Too many people have a refrigerator magnet that says "I love my utility." So it is something that is a problem endemic to the utility industry, and it just is, and that's no excuse for it. Part of what we need to do is be mindful that, and you'll hear this from me, assuming I get confirmed, you will hear this from me time and again. I look at the people that are served by the utility as customers, not as ratepayers. They happen to pay the rates, but they need to be treated as customers first, and that is a mantra and an action that I will support. That said, I'm not going to sit here today and say that there is necessarily inherently intentional poor action on behalf of the department. That would surprise me. But it wouldn't be too surprising at times to recognize that perhaps at times individuals don't think first of them as customers, and it's an industry issue, and we'll work on it. And I have my mind's eye on that issue.
Now, I'm glad to hear that approach, and I could be wrong. Council members may have a different sense of this, but my sense is that it's been more of the case in recent years that DWP has as poor an image both in terms of transparency and honesty and in customer service. My recollection, and it may be through rose-colored glasses, is that 15 or 20 years ago, this was a better respected agency vis-a-vis its counterparts than it is today. So hopefully we'd like to bring that level of respect based on deserving that respect back to the DWP.
I shared that. I would offer up that it was probably easier to maintain the system, easier to keep rates down such 15 years ago than it is today, and that's probably not a small part of why you might be dealing with some of those concerns and issues. But I think we're on a similar page, Councilman.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, before we take our vote, we do have speaker cards on this item, and I would like to invite, I think there's 3 folks left at 2 minutes each. If you can come on up, and can you pull up an extra chair? I think there's, 3 chairs up here? Tony Wilkinson, Jack Humphreysville, I think Mike Massey left. Am I wrong? Is he still here? He's gone? Okay.
He's outside.
Is he outside?
I don't know. Is he still?
Okay, and Dr. Williams. Tony.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Madam Chairman. Last year was not an easy year for any of us involved in Department of Water and Power issues. I'm Tony Wilkinson from Panorama City, and I chair the Neighborhood Council Department of Water and Power Memorandum of Understanding Oversight Committee, which is basically an information sharing agreement. So we stay out of politics and don't take political positions. But I will say that after it's been hard on the department, hard on the council, hard on the board, and hard on the customers and community organizations what we went through last year. I do think in the last 6 months, I'd like to say that people at the department seem, with some prodding from the council and other organizations, to really be making an effort to be more open. We've seen a strategic plan. This under Interim General Manager Austin Bootner. We've seen an integrated resources plan that has some real numbers for the first time. And I appreciate the department's statement that this integrated resource plan, the assumptions will be reviewed every year, and that the plan will be redone every 2 years, recognizing, as Mr. Nichols has said, that this is a moving target. And each one of these iterations is going to give an opportunity for more public input. Plus the management retreats and so on directed at change that Mr. Bootner has done in senior management. And so what I do see is a department poised for greater openness if the leadership of this department will carry forward that change that's in process. And I'm really excited. I haven't had a chance to meet Mr. Nichols to talk with him, but I'm really excited about the professionalization of the general managership that is represented by his capabilities. Thank you.
Mr. Humphreysville. Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay.
No. Let him go
Okay.
ahead.
Dr. Clyde Williams, El Sereno, Northeast LA, also a DWP liaison. Well, he's better than others that we've had recently. That's a good thing.
Hey, bringing endorsement.
Hey.
Okay.
However, remember he's a consultant and working with the department. No, he won't be working with the department. It's his department. He has to run it. Where is the vision? You mentioned trust. You mentioned confidence. The leader has to provide a vision, trust, to instill confidence not into the customers, but into not even the stakeholders, the shareholders of this largest facility, organization, municipal utility in the United States. Where's the vision? Transparency has been mentioned. Timeliness, ratepayers, rates. Where are we going? We haven't had a strategic plan in 3 years. Huron did one, then did another, then they were contracted to do another, and I haven't heard what that's going on. But it's a question as to, here's the leader of the largest municipal utility in the United States. Where's the vision? What gives us confidence that we, the ratepayers, the shareholders, the stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, will be, where will we be in 5 years? Where's the vision for this organization? Where's the money going to come for this organization? It's going to come from the ratepayers, the shareholders. It's not going to come, quotes, from the city. It's not going to come from anybody other than those people who use the water and the power. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Humperville.
Well, Mr. Nichols, how are you? I think this is a phenomenally intellectually challenging opportunity that you have. I think it's a huge turnaround situation, and I think which begs for efficiency of operations. I couldn't imagine a better opportunity than to get a hold of this Department of Water and Power and change its profile. I think one of the most important things here is going to be transparency. And the transparency is important so that you're proactive, so that we're not reactive. And it's working with us and making sure everybody is working off the same information. I hope you're going to have the authority to implement your plans, whether it relates to personnel, whether it relates to the IEA survey and benchmarking, whether it's the PA consulting report and the recommendations they made, whether it's the IRP, whether it's the water IRP. I think those are all obviously very huge tasks, and I think you need to have the authority to do that. I think there are a number of issues that we have. One of the ones that gets me is cap and trade. Is the DWP going to have to pay $700 million a year to the private utilities because of the cap and trade thing? That's a ripoff. I'd rather keep the money in our system than have our rates rise by 20 to 25%. Another issue that gets to me is the RAF. The DWP swiped $63.6 million of our water transfer fee without even consulting us. I think another issue is the bloated bureaucracy. In the last couple of years, 1,600 people came over from the city to DWP. I don't think any of them were engineers or linemen, so I think we have a little bit of bloat. And I think the final thing is going to be handling the politics of this situation, working with City Hall and making sure that City Hall makes sure you're a utility and not a piggy bank. Obviously, the last thing, the way we're going to judge you is rates, and there are going to be some very interesting trade-offs between energy renewable and all, energy, coal, all those types of things, and also on the water side. We look forward to working with you. We hope you're going to be transparent, and we think you have a great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humperville, and Mr. Massey has left. That's the end of our speaker cards on this item, and if there is no objection, we will move this item forward to council. And when is it set for council?
The 18th,
Okay.
a week from today. Would the committee like to actually render a position to approve or concur?
Without objection, move for approval. So moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you then. All right, that marks the end of our agenda, but we do have one speaker card from Dr. Williams. Come back up here.
Yeah. Change your pace. Dr. Clyde Williams, El Sereno, Northeast LA. One of the elements that I explored earlier today was life of projects. Here's one of the real times that we're looking at. There's stormwater, and there are TMDL requirements being made upon us. Okay, The TMDL is a regulation. It's not a capital works, but it requires capital works. And now we've accepted it, or will be accepting it, and the Regional Water Quality Control Board will stamp it, and we will have to pay for it. That means capital works. Well, the Bureau of Sanitation has already given some numbers. $8 billion for the stormwater projects during to the year maybe 2020. Their own percentages, they gave 6 to 10% per year for operations and maintenance. Well, that means a lot of money. 8%, say, times $8 billion a year. Okay, real time. Proposition O gave us screens to put on the stormwater inlets. Oh, guess what? A lot of the stormwater inlets weren't cleaned and are not cleaned now and are ponding water or diverting water around the screens. So that was a trash TMDL requirement. Put screens on. Well, we put screens on. But there's nobody operating and maintaining them because the $500 million for Proposition O would only need $40 or $50 million to operate and maintain properly. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, I wanted to reopen the record on item number 1 so that Mr. Cardenas can vote. Mr. CLA, do I need to do a motion to do that, or can I just make a direction?
No, just make a direction.
All right, I want to reopen the vote on item 1 and then revote. Mr. Cardenas should be recorded as an aye vote.
Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. The meeting's adjourned.